Rev students, what is up? How you guys doing? Hey, I know you guys, this group right here is my favorite group because they're always just so excited to see me. Waffle House is so great. Listen, hey, I'm excited because we are kicking off a brand new series called Even If, and this series is all about change. And I'm not sure if you know anything about change, if you've experienced different types of change in your life, but change is coming for you. Change happens all around us. I'm not sure if you know what today is. Today is September 1st, and for some people, that means it is the end of summer, and seasons has changed, and it is the start of fall. I wore my timely hoodie to celebrate and usher in the start of fall today, so things are changing. I remember growing up, one of the significant changes that happened to me when I was in middle school students is our family moved. And so we had basically, for as long as I could remember, probably when I was about 3 or 4, we moved in our neighborhood, and we lived there till I was about a 7th grade student. And all of my friends were on the same street. We did everything together, went to the same school, stood at the bus stop, played together, and we moved, and it completely changed everything for me. Going to a new school, seeing new teachers, trying to make new friends. I wasn't in the same area, didn't see the same people, and the group of people that I grew up with were no longer around me, and that was a big change, a big adjustment. I was in a new place with new people. That was a big change and a big adjustment. It probably was really a couple years later, really into high school, before I finally felt like I belonged somewhere again, like I knew people and was known. And really that change took me quite a while to get back to a place like I felt like I was good at. And there's changes that you are going to be facing and have faced as students. Every year your classes change, your teachers change. You're going to experience change in a lot of different ways. You're going to change grades. At some point, some of you are going to stop riding the bus and start driving a car. Some of you will maybe move at some point like I did, and you're going to have to deal with all of the effects of change in that. Maybe for some of you, your friend group has changed, and that has been a really hard thing for you to navigate through and experience and deal with. And maybe you still feel like you're in the middle of that right now. Maybe your family has gone through some changes, and because of those changes your family has gone through, you feel like there are a lot of unknowns. You feel very confused. There are a lot of difficult emotions tied into that. Maybe a parent has lost a job, and now finances have changed. Things that you used to expect are no longer there, and that is a change that can be difficult to understand, to deal with. And the reality is, like I said, change is coming. There's changes in the world that we're experiencing. For the last 2 years, a virus has completely changed our lives. We've changed the way we interacted with people. It's changed where we go and how we go there. There are people that we know that are sick or have even died because of this. It has changed our lives. And really, when it comes to change, there's 2 types. And this might be groundbreaking. This might be a brand new idea for you. So get ready, get prepared. There's good change, and then there's bad change. So 2 types of change: good change and bad change. And good change is change that we want. Good change is change that we like. Good change is you've been single, but that person you have been crushing on has finally received and has given back all of that affection, and you are now dating, and you now are part of just this special, awesome relationship. And so that is a big change for you. A good change is you were on the bench, but you have now been given a starting position on the team, and that is a good change. Good changes are changes that benefit us positively. We don't have a problem with that change at all. It's the other change that is frustrating. It's the other change we want to avoid at all costs, and that is bad change. Bad change is moving and completely uprooting your life and your friends. Bad change is a bad breakup, a broken heart. Bad change is losing someone close to you. And the thing is like I said, good change we don't mind, but bad change we don't want any part of. And when it comes to this, whether you like it or not, change is inevitable. Like I've said, it is coming for you. You can't escape it. You can't numb it. You can't make it go away. And not only is it going to happen, and not only is it going to affect you, it has the ability to affect other people. So here's something else. The ripple effect of change has the ability to affect everyone. Other people's change can affect you, and your change can affect other people. And change isn't new. It's not something new that's happened. It's been happening since the beginning of time. At one point, there was nothing, and then there was change, and God created everything. Change is not new, and your parents have experienced change. Can I tell you something? You were a change for your parents. You were a change for your parents. And can I tell you something? Your parents' experienced change, and their parents experience change, and on and on and on. Change is not something new, and people have experienced change and loss. People have experienced change that looks like broken relationships. People have experienced change that looks like heartbreak and uncertainty and insecurity and on. Change is a reality in our lives. And when change comes, when we are in the middle of it, a lot of us wrestle with the same question that all people have really wrestled with when it comes to change. Who or what can I trust to be a constant in my life when everything seems to be constantly changing? Who or what can I trust to be a constant in my life when everything else is in a constant state of change? And not only just a constant state of change, but unwanted and unexpected change. And a lot of the Bible, specifically the New Testament, is going to be people that God is using to tell people in the midst of unexpected and unwanted and uncertain change to hold on. In the midst of whatever they're facing, in the midst of change that is coming to them, they are telling them to hold on. And that's the same encouragement that I'm going to have for you today. And the thing that they are pointing to, all of really the whole Bible, but specifically the New Testament authors, the thing that they're saying when you are experiencing change that you can hold on to is Jesus. And the author of Hebrews is going to say it like this: Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. I'll say it like this: Jesus never changes. Students, Jesus never changes. Who he was in the past is who he's going to be today and who he's going to be tomorrow. So when we see Jesus as loving, and when we see Jesus as caring, and when we see Jesus as good and kind and thoughtful, that isn't just something that someone else experienced way back when, or that isn't just how he thought of you way back then. That's still true today, and it's true tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And when everything is unstable, can I tell you something Jesus isn't? When everything in life feels like it's out of control and you don't know what's going on, he does. Listen, students, and we're in this series called Even If, and we're going to be talking for the next couple of weeks about change and how to navigate it and what we do with it when we're experiencing it. But here's the truth that's going to take us from where we are today to where we are next week and all the way through and hopefully for the rest of your life. And it's simply this: God doesn't change, even if. God doesn't change, even if. God doesn't change even if your family does. God doesn't change even if your friends do. God doesn't change even if your popularity does. God doesn't change even if your feelings do. God doesn't change even if, and you can fill in the blank with whatever you are experiencing, whatever change is coming your way. But in spite of all of that, God doesn't change. And there's some ways that we think that he does, and I'm going to talk about two specifically. The first one is we think that the way he feels about us change based on what we do. So many times we feel that when we are good and things are going good, that God is happy with us and he loves us and everything's great and it's sunshine and it's rainbows. But as soon as we do something bad or something bad is happening to us, now God is mad at us, he is punishing us, look at what we did. And so many times, I've talked about this verse multiple times, so maybe it sounds like a broken record to you, but I want you to hear it. And the reason that I say it over and over and over and over again is because it is true. And that Ephesians 1 tells us, before the foundation of the world, you were loved. Before the foundation. So before God created the earth and before he created the waters and before he created the mountain and the animals and the peoples and the ways and all the things, it said that when he thought about you, he loved you. And can I tell you something? I'm going to be hard pressed to be convinced that something that you can do can change the way God feels. It's going to be really hard for you to convince me because there is thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years that say that he has not changed one way how he feels about you. And that's true before the foundations of the earth, and that is true today, and that will be true at the end of our lives when we see him face to face. The other way I believe that we feel like he changes is based on our situation. So the way we think about this is, does he care even if something happens? Does he care when I'm experiencing loss? Does he care when things are going on in my life and they are hurting me? Does he care when I'm anxious? Does he care when I'm scared? Does he care when I am alone? Does he care if? And so many times we try to take our situation and say that because our situation has changed, obviously God has changed, but what I'm trying to communicate to you is that he has always been the same. And he has always will be in whatever situation you are in, whatever changes is affecting your life. Students, he has not. And the author of Hebrews is going to point to a person named Abraham as an example for us to follow, as an example for us to look through in his story to see how God's promises are true, to see how God is faithful, to see how God is unchanging in all of his ways. And Abraham is someone we know as someone who's patient. He's someone who is, that the scriptures tell us that he trusted God in a way that changed everything literally. But he was also someone who experienced change. His name changed. At one point, he was called Abram, and then God's like, hey, your name's Abraham now. His location, his home changed. He had to move. His move was probably a lot different than yours. He was just kind of minding his own business, and a voice in the sky says, hey, I have something really big for you, but I need you and all of your people and all your family and all of your stuff to go over here. I know you don't know where that is. I know you don't know what's going to happen. But you're going to want to do that. And so just greatest sales pitch ever. And so Abraham, trusting this voice in the sky. And sometimes I think we miss this when we're reading the Bible because we've grown up in all this information. At this time, they didn't have a name for God. At this time, God doesn't even introduce himself until Moses, thousands and thousands of years later. At this point, it is literally a voice in the sky. They are just believing that there is something up there and they don't have a relationship with him yet. And God's initiation of it is, hey, I need you to pick up all of your stuff and go somewhere. And this is where Abraham finds himself. His life changed through a lot of reasons, but specifically through some of the consequences of his actions. His family changed. And throughout all of this, God had made a promise to him that he was going to be the father of many nations, that he was going to be blessed. All of his children's children were going to be blessed, and that they were going to number the stars. And so because this is what he wanted, Abraham picks up all of his stuff and he goes. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And over 25 years later, they are still waiting for God to deliver them even one child. And this promise that they changed their whole life to see. And this is where we find Abraham in this story. And God wants to convince him in this moment of his commitment to him, and the author of Hebrews is going to point to this oath that God took to convince Abraham and really to convince all of us of who he is and what he's doing. We'll pick it up in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 17. It says, "So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us." And so what the author of Hebrews is saying here, he's looking at the story of Abraham, and he's talking to these believers who are experiencing change. And he's saying, look at Abraham. Abraham experienced all this change. Abraham experienced all these things, and God gave Abraham a promise. And when that promise didn't seem like it was going to go through, and that promise seemed like it was void, when it seemed like it was an empty promise, God swore that it was going to be happen. And he says something about oaths here. Like when we swear to something, like usually it makes a point that you always swear to something bigger than yourself, right? So in recent history in the court, if you were going to give testimony, you would place your hand on a Bible and you would say that you're swearing that you're going to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And in that moment, you are saying, I am swearing to God that the words that are about to come to my mouth, out of my mouth, are true. And if it's not, God should do something about it. And in our generation, in our times, we might say, man, if someone's not believing, listen, I'm telling you the truth. I swear on my family. You're swearing on something important. You're swearing on something great. And here's the thing. When God took this oath, when God made this, there was nothing greater for him to swear on, so he swore on himself. He says, hey, by my purpose and my promise, I am going to see this fulfilled. And the author of Hebrews is saying these are two unchangeable things, his purpose and his promise, and that because of this, we can put our trust in it. And it's true for Abraham and it's true for us that God is wanting to convince us of his commitment to us. And he gives us two things right here, his purpose and his promise. His promise that he is going to bless Abraham's descendants, that he's going to build this great nation. And can I tell you something? Like God has fulfilled that, and he has continued to fulfill that, because there is the Jewish people that came through it, and God blessed them, and they grew up. And as Jesus was teaching, Jesus taught this new idea that was new for everyone, that all who believe through faith are now inheritors. We're heirs. We are part of that promise of Abraham. And literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years later, the promise that God gave Abraham, we are seeing is true by the simple fact that we are gathering here together in this room, heirs of this promise. And then he said, my purpose. And his purpose for Abraham was the same purpose that Jesus had, and is the same purpose and mission that God has given us. Not only that Abraham would be saved, but that Abraham's people and his descendants, and that all people who believe in him would be saved. And the encouragement that it gives us is that we can look on the faithfulness of Abraham's life, and through all of his people, through generations, and even the fact that we are in this room today, and that we can trust him. And the best way I can say this to you is because of his past provision. And don't miss this, because of his past provision, we can trust in his future faithfulness. Because of what he's done, regardless of what change we're going through, regardless of what we are dealing with, not only can we trust him now, but whatever we walk into tomorrow and whatever we walk into the next day, and we continue walking in on and on, we can trust him. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it took Abraham over 25 years before he received his first son in this promise. Yet thousands and thousands of years later, they number more than the stars, just like God said. We can trust in his purpose and his promise. The author of Hebrews has one more thing for us in verse 19. He says, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. Don't miss this. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner place behind the curtain where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And what he is saying here is he's saying, hey, the author is speaking to Jewish Christians who are experiencing a ton of change. They are in a non-Jewish, non-Christian culture. They have been scattered. They are, all of these new beliefs about Jesus and God are starting to pop up, and they are not sure what to believe. And the author of Hebrews is saying that as we look at Jesus, we have something we can hold on to despite the change that is going around us, whatever loss we are experiencing. We have something to hold on to, whatever hurt we are experiencing, whatever change we are experiencing. We have something to hold on to. And when things change and when things feel out of control, listen, we can run to Jesus, who it says he has gone before us into the inner place. And I don't have a lot of time, and there's so much to unpack about what this inner place is and what it does, but in Jewish history, God had set up this sacrificial system, and there was someone who was the high priest, and they were chosen to offer sacrifice for the sins of all of God's people. And so once a year, they would enter this place, this inner room, which is where God's presence was. And they would have to offer a sacrifice for themselves, present themselves clean, present themselves pure, and they would walk in and begin to offer sacrifice for the people. Because if they walked in unclean and impure, they would die immediately. And so what the author of Hebrews is saying is that Jesus, because of what Jesus has done on the cross, he pulled back the curtain and he walked into the inner room, this place where the presence of God was. And he says, I am preparing a place for you to be able to come here now. And he's saying, you don't have to clean yourself up before you come here, because I am preparing a way for you. And he's saying that this trust, this presence of God that we now have the ability to enter into, that we now have the ability to experience, if we want to know how we can have something to hold on to trust when change is going on around us, he said, experience the presence of God and you have access to it now. It uses the analogy of a ship. Ship was how an anchor was what held the ship in place in the middle of storms so that it would not be tossed about. And can I tell you something, students? Change is a storm. And I believe as change has come into some of your lives, that you probably just feel like you're being tossed about and that everything's out of control and you don't even know what's going on anymore. And the author of Hebrews is trying to encourage you and say, you have something to hold on to. The author, Warren Wiersbe, says, our anchor is sure, it cannot break, and it is steadfast, it cannot slip. No earthly anchor can give that kind of security. And what God is trying to encourage you to do, regardless of what you are experiencing, is to hold on. And there's one more thing that the author of Hebrews is pointing out here, and I believe it's important to bring it up, is the last part of Abraham's story. Because Abraham was waiting on this promise, this promised child, this promised generation. He eventually gets it. And he is raising his son Isaac. He's been waiting for over 25 years to receive this promise. And one day God comes to him and says, you're going to take this promised child and you're going to take it up to the altar and you're going to offer it as a sacrifice. Man, I just imagine what's going on in Abraham's mind as he's walking up there and he's saying, man, I've been waiting for this my whole life. I've been waiting for this my whole life. I've been waiting for this my whole life. And the thing I've been holding on to, God is now asking me to give up. I imagine as he's walking there and is he having conversations with his son, or is there just eerie silence? And his son is asking him, hey, where's the sacrifice? We're going to offer a sacrifice. And Abraham's responding, God's going to provide. He brings him up onto the altar. And man, I want you to picture this scene. He's putting his son on the altar, and I just wonder if panic begins to set in Isaac's eyes and what went through Abraham's mind as he saw this, and as he begins to raise a knife, and God comes and says, stop. And he stops him in the middle of it. He says, I will provide a sacrifice. And maybe you're looking at that story and you're like, this is crazy, this is weird, this is unfair, man, this is wicked, I don't even know what's going on. How could God ask him to do that? And God is testing him and asking him a simple question in a very unsimple way. Make no mistake, very unsimple way, but the question he's simply asking him is, do you want me, or do you just want what I've given you? Do you want me, or do you just want what I've given you? And he was testing Abraham to see if he would be faithful to God, even if it cost him his son. Because God's faithfulness to us was going to cost him his son. I don't want you to miss this. When God said, I'm providing a sacrifice, you don't have to sacrifice your son. He wasn't just talking about the ram in that moment. He says, I was asking you if you were willing. Because I'm willing, and I am going to sacrifice my son so that I can ultimately fulfill the promise that I made to you and see all people saved. And if you want something that you know you can hold on to, when change is happening all around you, God is saying, my commitment to you, my purpose and my promise, which is unchanging, cost me my son. And when life feels crazy and when things are overwhelming and you don't understand, that is something you can put your trust in. But the question that he had for Abraham is the same question he has for you. Before we can get to how to navigate change and what we need to do when we're in the midst of it, we have to answer the question, do we just want the blessing and do we just want the promise? Or do we want him? And we are going to be navigating change for the rest of our life. It is a reality, but Jesus on the cross has purchased us access to his presence. The presence of God himself. And he's asking, do you want his presence, or do you just want his blessings? Do you just want the things he has to give you, or do you want him? And we're going to be talking about this the next couple of weeks, students, and I want you to dig in. I want you to ask yourself the question, when I'm experiencing change, do I just want God to bless me and get me out of whatever situation I don't like, or do I want him in the midst of it? Do I want more of him? Regardless of the cost. And as we are experiencing change, we have something to hold on to, something we can trust at high cost. An anchor for our souls when things are crazy. When the storm of change is tossing us about. And it's because of what Jesus did that we have something to hold on to.